January 1995. Grozny, a city in the foothills of the Caucasus Mountains in southern Russia, once one of the most beautiful and prosperous cities in the Soviet Union, has now become a hellhole. Every street vibrates with the thunderous sound of Russian warplanes and the constant shelling. The remains of tanks burn. Every building is a concrete skeleton, and the empty eyes of the windows only show images of death. This is the most horrific chapter of the First Chechen War. The vast Russian army, once a world superpower, is trapped in the capital of a tiny republic in its own country. And against them are the Chechen warriors, unparalleled courage, ruthlessness, turning every rubble into a death trap. The question is, how did this small territory become a bloody nightmare for Russia? Why did the Chechens fight against a world power for centuries? And how did this nationalist struggle turn into a jihadist movement? In today's episode, we will explore that starting point. The birth of a warrior nation, the identity of the Chechens and the Caucasian War. The name of this remote region in the North Caucasus is Chechnya. Its inhabitants call themselves Nakchi. The foundation of their society is tape or lineage. Loyalty to the lineage is more important to them than to the state. This bond has created a deep brotherhood and incredible resilience. In 1817, the ambitions of the Russian Tsars Peter the Great and Catherine turned towards the Caucasus. The goal was to control the route to the Persian and Ottoman empires. But there, the Muslim tribes led by Imam Shamil stood as an impenetrable wall. The Caucasian War, 1817 to 1864, began. For almost half a century, Imam Shamil's guerrilla tactics subdued the Tsar's army. Although Russia won in 1864, they could never suppress the Chechens' desire for independence. This war gives birth to an eternal hatred that flows through generations.
Deportation and betrayal. Soviet era. After the Russian Revolution of 1917, the Chechens dreamed of independence. But the Bolsheviks proved more ruthless than the Tsars. Stalin's policies of collectivization and the suppression of Islam were imposed on the Chechens. Then came the dark chapter in history. February 23, 1944. Operation Lent. On Stalin's orders, about 500,000 Chechens and Ingush were forcibly removed from their homes on false charges at just 20 minutes' notice. They were sent on freight trains like cattle to Kazakhstan and Siberia. More than a quarter of the people died on the way from hunger, disease, and cold. The Chechens remember this genocide as Odak. In 1957, Khrushchev allowed them to return, but their homes were occupied by Russians and other ethnic groups. This trauma of 1944 sowed the seeds of lasting distrust and revenge against Moscow in the minds of the Chechens.
Soviet collapse and the First Chechen War, 1991 to 1996. In 1991, when the waves of the collapse of the Soviet Union reached Chechnya, Soviet Air Force General Dokar Dudayev came to power. He unilaterally declared the independence of the Chechen Republic of Ichkeria. Boris Yeltsin's Russia did not accept this, because if Chechnya was lost, regions such as Tatarstan and Dagestan could also separate due to the domino effect. In addition, the Caspian Sea oil pipeline passes through Chechnya. On December 11, 1994, the Russian army entered Chechnya. Defense Minister Grozny boasted that an airborne regiment would capture Grozny in a few hours, but the reality was different. On New Year's Eve, armored convoys of inexperienced Russian soldiers were sent into the city center. Chechen fighters, many of whom were veterans of Soviet urban warfare, began destroying tanks with RPGs from the basements and rooftops of high-rise buildings. The streets of Grozny became a burning grave for Russian troops. After 21 months of bloody fighting, Chechen fighters retook Grozny in August 1996. Russian forces were forced to retreat. Russia accepted a humiliating defeat with the Hasavurt Agreement. After winning the war, Chechnya gained de facto independence, but no peace. The economy was devastated. Crime, kidnapping, and banditry were commonplace. President Aslan Maskhadov had little control. Taking advantage of the chaos, a new force entered Chechnya, the Wahhabi or Salafi jihadists. Led by Khattab of Saudi Arabia and Shamil Basayev, veterans of the Afghan War, they wanted not just independence, but an Islamic emirate in the entire North Caucasus. They called Maskhadov's secular government infidels. Chechen society was divided into two camps, nationalists versus jihadists. In August 1999, Basayev and Khattab launched an attack on Dagestan, aiming to foment an insurgency there. At the same time, in September, apartment bombings in Moscow, Volgodonsk, and Buynaksk, Russia, killed nearly 300 people. The Russian government claimed that Chechen jihadists were responsible. Many analysts believe that this was a false flag operation by the FSB to create a pretext for war.
The Second Chechen War and Putin's Chechenization, 1999 to 2009. The people of Russia are enraged by the bombing, and by capitalizing on that anger, Vladimir Putin rose to the top of power. The Second Chechen War began in October 1999. Learning from the mistakes of the First War, the Russian forces razed Grozny and surrounding villages to the ground with air and artillery attacks for several weeks. Recaptured Grozny in February 2000. But this time, Putin's strategy was different. Chechenization alongside military might, meaning controlling the Chechens with the Chechens. He chose Chief Mufti Ahmad Kadyrov, who had been anti-Russian in the First War, who later sided with Russia, fearing a Wahhabi uprising. Forces loyal to Kadyrov and his son Ramzan, Kadyrovsi, began a civil war against the separatists. When Ahmad was killed in 2004, Ramzan Kadyrov became the new leader. Ramzan built a personal fiefdom in Chechnya with billions of dollars and political support from Moscow. In 2009, Russia officially declared the end of the anti-terrorist operation. Today's Chechnya, a golden cage. If you visit Grozny today, you won't believe your eyes. Huge glass buildings, Europe's largest mosque, luxury shopping malls. Ramzan Kadyrov spent billions of dollars of Moscow's budget to rebuild the city. But hidden behind this apparent peace is a terrible reality. Under Kadyrov's rule, Chechnya has become a private fiefdom within the Russian Federation. Human rights organizations say that extrajudicial killings, disappearances, and torture are daily occurrences here. People become invisible with a little criticism. Hijab is mandatory for women, imposing a strict interpretation of Sharia. But in exchange for all this, Putin has ensured that there will be no more separatist awakening in Chechnya. And Kadyrov has proven his absolute loyalty. He has sent his forces into the Ukraine war as Putin's foot soldiers. Chechnya's desire for independence, written in blood for centuries, is dormant for now. Temporary suppression may be possible with force and money, but complete eradication is almost impossible. Behind Kadyrov's iron rule, this fiery terrain waits in silence. Time will tell what the next chapter of history will be written. Do you think Russia's post-Putin weakness could reignite separatist fires in Chechnya? Tell in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe our channel.